911, what's your emergency?
I'm at Forsyth Park near the fountain. My sister, Lele Chen, she's 14. Her bike's here, her sketchbook's all over the grass, and she's gone.
Is anyone with you? Any signs of a struggle?
No. That's the worst part. No blood, no torn clothes, nothing.
When did you last see her?
Around 3. She came to draw the oaks. She should have been home by dinner.
Units are en route. Stay on the line and keep people back from the bench. Describe her for me.
Blue sundress, braid down her back, 5'2". Lily, if you can hear me, please answer.
The summer sun was a heavy, bronze disk in the sky over the slow-moving waters of the Savannah River when 14-year-old Lele Chen left her home in the historic district of Savannah, Georgia. With a woven basket hooked over her arm, she told her mother she was going to sketch the old oak trees in Forsyth Park. It seemed like a perfectly innocent afternoon for a creative, quiet girl. It became the beginning of a nightmare that would span nearly 2 decades. By twilight, Lily's bicycle was found leaning against a park bench, its basket empty, her sketchbook and pencils scattered on the grass nearby. As the deep, humid darkness of a southern night enveloped the city, the beams of police and volunteer flashlights swept through the park's Spanish moss-draped avenues, calling her name into the stillness. The community watched, hour by hour, day by day, but the secret remained buried in the shadows of Savannah's ancient squares. What unraveled afterward would not only shatter the Chen family, but would haunt the entire state of Georgia for 18 years. Savannah, Georgia, July 12, 2006. Quick note before we dig in. If careful, timeline-driven cases are your thing, please subscribe. You'll be one of this channel's first supporters. And drop your city and country in the comments so I can shout a few out in the next episode. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the sweet, heavy scent of magnolia blossoms and the distant tang of the Atlantic. In a modest, clapboard house on East Jones Street, Lele Chen was packing a small container of fresh fruit for her daughter. 14-year-old Lily, a petite girl with thoughtful eyes and her hair in a neat braid, chatted with her older brother Leo about the lighting in the park for her drawings. Lily was a gifted artist, a quiet and observant girl cherished by her teachers and the small circle of friends she had. She loved capturing the Gothic architecture and the haunting beauty of her city on paper, and dreamed of one day studying at the Savannah College of Art and Design. May often said that Lily saw the world in shades and lines the rest of them missed. That afternoon, Lily pulled on a light blue sundress, slung her canvas satchel over her shoulder, and flashed a quick, shy smile. "I'm just going to the park to draw the fountain. I'll be back before dinner," she reassured her mother. Leo, ever the protective older brother, teased her about her dedication to getting the shading just right, but ended with, "Just keep your phone charged, okay? Call if you need a ride home." She nodded, gave her mother a quick hug, and stepped out into the balmy afternoon. The last image May would cling to was her daughter's retreating figure, the blue of her dress a bright spot against the grey cobblestones, turning to wave once before disappearing around the corner. But the afternoon stretched on, the light turning golden, then long and purple. Lily's usual seat at the dinner table remained empty. Calls from her mother and brother went straight to voicemail. A cold dread began to coil in May's stomach. Leo, his own anxiety mounting, decided to retrace her likely route to Forsyth Park. It was fully dark, the park lamps casting pools of hazy light, when he found her bicycle. It was upright, leaning against a bench near the famous Forsyth fountain. Her satchel was on the ground, its contents, a sketchbook, charcoal pencils, a half-eaten apple, spilled out onto the grass. Her phone, its battery dead, lay screen down nearby. There were no signs of a struggle, no torn clothing, just a profound and chilling emptiness, as if the 14-year-old had simply evaporated into the thick evening air. Leo's call to the police was frantic, his voice cracking with a fear he couldn't control. Back home, May collapsed upon hearing the news, her cries echoing in the small, suddenly cavernous house. Neighbors gathered on the porch, speaking in hushed, disbelieving tones. Everyone knew Lily. She was not a girl to run away, to cause trouble, to disappear. A deep unease, foreign to their usually tranquil neighborhood, settled over them like a shroud. For a community steeped in history and ghost stories, a very real and present horror had arrived. Within the hour, the Savannah Chatham Metropolitan Police Department had multiple units at the park. The area around the bench was immediately cordoned off with yellow tape that glowed under the portable halogen lights they erected. Officers meticulously documented the scene: the bicycle, the abandoned belongings, the pristine phone. There was no blood, no evidence of a drag mark, nothing to indicate a violent struggle. This absence of clues was, in itself, the most terrifying clue of all. July 12, 2006, became the longest night the Chen family and the city of Savannah had ever known. An emergency search order was issued. Dozens of officers, joined by K-9 units and volunteers from the community, fanned out across the park's 30 acres. The beams of their flashlights cut through the dense, shadowy avenues of ancient live oaks, their search made eerie by the constant, gentle rustle of Spanish moss overhead. Helicopters from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, circled above, their powerful spotlights scanning the ground below. Every heat signature, a possum, a raccoon, a cluster of birds, sent a team scrambling, only for hope to curdle into disappointment once more. The community response was immense. Over 100 volunteers, many of them Lily's classmates and their parents, arrived with flashlights and determination. They formed human chains, sweeping through the azalea bushes and around the monuments, their voices hoarse from calling her name. Leo joined them, his own voice breaking as he shouted for his sister. The sight of these teenagers, their faces pale and frightened, searching for their friend in the oppressive southern night, was heartbreaking. At the Chen home, May remained tethered to the landline phone, leaving frantic, tear-soaked voicemails. "Lily, baby, where are you? Please answer me. Please." Each unanswered ring was a physical blow. Neighbors took turns sitting with her, offering comfort that felt hollow against the gaping void of uncertainty. Meanwhile, police technicians scoured traffic camera footage from the streets surrounding the park. They collected grainy videos from businesses on Bull Street and Gaston Street. The only useful clip showed Lily cycling into the park around 3:15 p.m., her braids swinging behind her. No one appeared to be following her. No suspicious vehicles were seen entering after her. The screen showed her cycling out of frame, and then nothing. It was the last recorded image of Lele Chen. The night deepened, but the search did not cease. The beams of light continued to dance through the park's dark corners, a desperate, flickering counterpoint to the steady, indifferent stars above. Even the most experienced officers couldn't hide their growing tension. Each passing hour diminished the likelihood of finding Lily alive. By 4 a.m., the search was scaled back to a coordinated grid pattern. The initial frenzy had yielded nothing. The park, for all its beauty, had become a sphinx, guarding its secret with a silent, moss-draped impenetrability. The image of those dwindling lights, still searching as the first hint of dawn tinged the eastern sky, was seared into the memory of a city that felt it had failed one of its own. The community, hearing whispers of a person of interest, latched onto Jones. For a few days, it felt like a breakthrough. But then the results came back. His DNA did not match. The tread on his boots was similar, but not a definitive match. Samuel Jones was released. The public disappointment was palpable, curdling into anger toward the police. Why had they leaked his name? Why couldn't they get it right? Others were investigated. A park maintenance worker whose schedule was unaccounted for, a delivery driver seen making a wrong turn into the park that afternoon. All provided DNA. All had their alibis painstakingly cross-checked. One by one, they were eliminated. Each time a suspect was cleared, a local news headline would declare another dead end in Chen case. The community's patience wore thin. Trust in the police eroded daily. The Chatham County Sheriff held press conferences, insisting every lead was being pursued, but the public saw only failure. For the Chen family, this cycle of raised hopes and crushing eliminations was a unique form of torture. May had to see the faces of potential monsters paraded on the news, each one a man who might have killed her daughter, only to see them walk free. Leo clung to the DNA report, feeling his sister's last gift to them was being squandered. They began to fear the case would never be solved, that Lily's killer would remain a shadow forever. By the end of 2006, with the list of obvious suspects exhausted, the case stalled. The initial media frenzy died down. The story was moved from the front page to brief segments on the local news. The wooden stakes and crime scene tape in the park were removed, the earth reclaimed by grass and moss. The Lele Chen case began its slow, inexorable slide into the cold case files, a silent, aching wound on the heart of Savannah. For nearly 12 years after Lily's murder, the Chen family held a vigil in Forsyth Park every July 12th. Mei Lin would place a single white orchid, Lily's favorite flower, on the bench near the fountain. The gatherings were small but steadfast, a quiet rebuke to a city that seemed to want to move on. Leo, who had put his own life on hold, became a vocal advocate for victims' families, petitioning the state legislature for more resources for cold case investigations. Their relentless voices, combined with a national shift toward re-examining cold cases using genetic genealogy, finally spurred action. In 2018, the GBI's Cold Case Unit, in partnership with the FBI, announced they would re-examine the Lele Chen case. Evidence preserved since 2006, the fingernail scrapings, the denim scrap, was sent to a private forensic lab in Virginia specializing in next-generation sequencing, NGS. This technology could analyze degraded or minute DNA samples in ways that were impossible a decade prior. The evidence boxes were opened under strict protocol. For Leo, watching the transfer was like watching his sister get a second chance. "This is it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This is her voice." The lab work took months. The NGS machines worked around the clock, piecing together fragmented DNA strands. Scientists painstakingly filtered out contaminants to isolate a usable genetic profile. Once reconstructed, it was run through the FBI's CODIS database. The wait was agonizing for the family and investigators. The results, when they came in late 2018, were a devastating blow. No matches. The killer's DNA was not in any criminal database. The meeting room at GBI headquarters was silent. Leo slammed his hand on the table in frustration. May simply stared, her hope visibly crumbling. The lead detective tried to offer reassurance. "This doesn't mean it's over. It just means he hasn't been arrested for something else." But the words felt hollow. The news was reported cautiously by local media. The hope that had briefly flickered in the community was snuffed out. Yet, internally, the investigators did not give up. The negative CODIS hit pushed them toward a more advanced, albeit controversial, tool, forensic genetic genealogy. They needed a court order to upload the unknown DNA profile to public genetic databases like GEDmatch, which contain millions of user-submitted DNA profiles from people researching their ancestry. The petition argued that the severity of the crime and the exhaustion of all other leads justified this step. A judge agreed. The DNA profile was uploaded. Within days, the algorithm returned a list of genetic relatives, distant cousins, third and fourth removed. It was a start. Genetic genealogists began the monumental task of building out a family tree from these distant matches, using public records, obituaries, and census data. It was like finding a single thread and slowly, painstakingly, weaving it back into a vast tapestry. The tree expanded from a few names in Florida to hundreds across the southeastern United States. They focused on male relatives who would have been in the Savannah area in the summer of 2006. The list narrowed from hundreds to dozens to a handful of viable suspects. Among them, one name began to stand out: David Miller. In 2006, he was 38 years old, working as a long-haul trucker based out of Savannah. His routes often brought him through the city, and his CB handle was even Savannah Ghost. He had no criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. He was married, had 2 kids, and now lived in a suburb of Atlanta. Investigators noted that his driving logs from his former trucking company placed him in Savannah on July 12, 2006. He had taken a 4-hour layover that afternoon, claiming he needed to fix a faulty brake light. His whereabouts during those 4 hours were unaccounted for. The genealogical data and the real-world timeline were aligning. David Miller was now the prime suspect. To confirm it, they needed his DNA. A multi-agency task force began discreet surveillance on Miller in Atlanta. They noted his routines. He stopped at the same coffee shop every morning, always drinking from a disposable cup. One morning, after he tossed his cup into a public trash can, an agent retrieved it. The lip of the cup, stained with his saliva, was a potential gold mine. The cup was rushed to the lab. The DNA extracted from it was compared to the profile from under Lele Chen's fingernails. The call came to the task force on a Tuesday morning. The forensic scientist's voice was calm and definitive. "It's a match. We are 100% certain. The DNA from the coffee cup is identical to the DNA from the victim's nails." After 18 years, they had their man. The team moved quickly but carefully. They obtained an arrest warrant for David Miller for the murder of Lele Chen. On a quiet morning in June 2024, FBI agents and local police converged on his home in Atlanta. When they knocked, he answered calmly. As the agents read him his rights, his wife stood in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. His teenage children watched from the living room, their world collapsing in an instant. Miller offered no resistance, his face a pale, unreadable mask. The kind, quiet trucker, the family man, was led away in handcuffs for a crime committed nearly 2 decades prior. News of the arrest exploded across Georgia. Cold case arrest. Trucker charged in 2006 murder of Savannah teen. The Chen family was notified privately before the news broke. May wept, clutching a framed photo of Lele. Leo felt a surge of vindication so powerful it left him trembling. "We never forgot," he told a reporter later that day. "And now he won't be able to either." David Miller was extradited to Savannah to await trial. He pled not guilty, maintaining his silence. The evidence against him, however, was overwhelming. The DNA match was incontrovertible. His presence in the city that day was documented, and the familial link built through genetic genealogy painted a damning picture. The trial was a media sensation, a painful but necessary revisiting of an old wound for the city of Savannah. Forensic experts explained the DNA technology in detail. The jury saw the heartbreaking evidence photos from the park. May and Leo Chen testified, their pain still raw after 18 years. The defense had little to work with. They could not break the DNA evidence and could only try to cast doubt on the timeline, which was already shaky due to the passage of time. The jury deliberated for less than 8 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts. At the sentencing hearing, David Miller finally spoke. In a flat, emotionless voice, he stated, "I maintain my innocence." He offered no explanation, no apology, no motive. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the Chen family, it was the closure they had fought for nearly 2 decades. There was no joy, only a profound and weary sense of resolution. The monster had a name and a face, and he was behind bars. "It doesn't bring her back," May said on the courthouse steps, Leo's arm around her. "But it means her story has an ending. She can finally rest. And so can we." The city of Savannah, which had held its breath for 18 years, could finally exhale. The ghost that had haunted Forsyth Park had been given a name, and the long, dark shadow over the city began to lift, allowing the memory of a sweet, artistic girl to be about her life, and not just her death. The conviction of David Miller was not an end point, but a seismic event whose aftershocks rippled through the court system, the city of Savannah, and the very soul of the Chen family. The months that followed the verdict were a new, and in some ways more complex, chapter of their long ordeal. The silence after the storm. For Lele Chen, the silence in her home on East Jones Street became a physical presence. For 18 years, the house had been a command center in a long war. The phone was a lifeline, ringing with updates from detectives, calls from advocates, and words of support from a persistent core of friends. Now, the phone was largely silent. The constant, low hum of anxiety that had been her baseline for so long had vanished, leaving a void so profound it felt like a new kind of pain. She found herself standing in the doorway of Lily's room, which she had kept exactly as it was. The half-finished sketch of the Forsyth Park fountain was still on the desk. But the feeling in the room had shifted. It was no longer a shrine to a frozen moment of anguish. It was becoming a museum of a life. The change was subtle, but to May, it was everything. The fight was over. The purpose that had defined her existence for nearly 2 decades was gone. She was left with the victory, and the vast, empty landscape of a life without her daughter. Leo, now a man shaped more by grief than by time, faced a different struggle. He had dedicated his youth to being his mother's rock and his sister's avenger. He had foregone college, put relationships on hold, and channeled every ounce of his energy into the case. In the wake of the trial, he was a soldier without a war. He'd wake up in the morning and for a split second reach for his phone to check for updates from the GBI task force, only to remember there were none. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, weary exhaustion and a disorienting question. Who am I now? The city's scar. Savannah, too, was changed. The story had captivated the nation, and the city's beautiful, moss-draped image was now permanently intertwined with a ghost story that was all too real. Tourists still flocked to take pictures by the fountain, but locals would often see them and exchange a knowing, somber glance. The park's beauty was now layered with a patina of melancholy. The bench where Lily's bicycle was found became an unofficial, organic memorial. It was never formalized, but it was rarely empty. A single white orchid might appear one day. A small, carefully drawn landscape on a torn piece of sketchbook paper would be tucked under a leg the next. A packet of pristine charcoal pencils would be left by a well-wisher. It was a quiet, ongoing conversation between the city and the memory of the girl they had failed to protect. The case also triggered a tangible, bureaucratic change. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Cold Case Unit, once underfunded and overwhelmed, found itself in the spotlight. The Chen case, as it was now known in law enforcement circles, became the prime example used by the state attorney general to lobby for what was informally dubbed Lily's Law. It passed with bipartisan support, establishing a permanent state fund to allow any municipal police department in Georgia to apply for resources to re-examine cold cases using advanced forensic techniques, including genetic genealogy. Lily's name, a symbol of tragic loss, was now also a beacon of hope for other families trapped in the same painful limbo. The unanswered why. David Miller, inmate number 787304, was processed into the Georgia state prison system. He continued to maintain his absolute innocence through his court-appointed lawyer, launching an appeal based on the novel and unconstitutional use of genetic genealogy and a violation of Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search. The appeals would drag on for years, a technical, legalistic echo of the crime that provided no comfort to anyone. His family in Atlanta was shattered. His wife, Carol, who had first met the news with staunch denial, eventually filed for divorce. The evidence was too overwhelming, the scrutiny too intense. Their 2 children, who had revered their quiet, hard-working father, were thrust into a nightmare. They eventually changed their last name, moved away, and severed all ties with their past. The man known as David Miller became a ghost in the system, defined by an act he never explained. He offered no confession, no motive, no expression of remorse. The chilling, fundamental question, why, would hang in the air, forever unanswered. This lack of resolution became a source of enduring torment for May. In a session with a grief counselor specializing in homicide loss, she broke down. "I can close my eyes and see his face from the news," she whispered, her hands trembling. "He is just a man. An ordinary, boring man. I cannot make the connection. I cannot fit the monster inside that face. What did he see when he looked at my Lily? Was it just opportunity? That's what destroys me. That her beautiful life could be taken for no reason at all. Not even a monster's reason. Just nothing. A new kind of mourning." 3 years after the trial, on a morning when the spring air was sweet with jasmine and the sunlight dappled through the live oaks, the city unveiled a small, bronze plaque in Forsyth Park. After much discussion with the Chen family, it was placed not near the site of the crime, but in a sunny, open spot near the camellia gardens Lily had loved to draw. The dedication was a quiet affair. City officials, a few detectives who had worked the case for years, and a small crowd of citizens who had never forgotten stood in a loose circle. Mei Lin, leaning on Leo's arm, listened as the mayor spoke not of murder, but of memory. The plaque's inscription was simple: "In memory of Lele Chen, a young artist who taught us to see the beauty in our city. Her spirit inspires a pursuit of justice, peace, and light." 1992 to 2006. After the speeches, Leo stayed behind as the crowd dispersed. He walked the familiar paths, his hands in his pockets. He stopped at the old bench. The anger that had once burned like a coal in his chest was now a cold, heavy stone. It was still there, but it no longer controlled him. He placed a smooth, grey stone from the bank of the Savannah River on the edge of the bench, a silent ritual he'd adopted years ago. He then walked to the new plaque. As he approached, he saw a girl, maybe 14, with a sketchbook open on her lap. She was intently focused on drawing the intricate detail of a camellia blossom. She looked up, sensing his presence, and offered a shy, slightly self-conscious smile. Leo's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, it was like looking through a window in time. He saw not a ghost, but life. He managed a small, genuine smile in return and gave a slight nod of encouragement before moving on. In that moment, he understood. The park would always hold their sorrow, but it was not only a place of death. It was still a place of immense beauty. It was still a place where artists came to create. His fight was over, but Lily's legacy didn't have to be defined solely by that fight. Honoring her could also mean finally allowing himself to live, to find joy, to build a future, to maybe one day have a family of his own and tell them stories about their brilliant, artistic aunt. He pulled out his phone. "Mom," he said, his voice clearer and lighter than it had been in years. "Let's go get lunch. That place you like on the river with the shrimp and grits. My treat." As he walked out of the park, the weight of the past 18 years was still with him, but he was no longer carrying it alone. He was learning to integrate it, to let it be a part of him without being all of him. The long night had finally ended. The morning had come, and with it, the daunting, fragile, and necessary task of learning how to live in the light again. The story of Lele Chen was complete.